Hello, welcome. So today we're going to be taking a look at the 6th and final part of the Kevin in a Big Rig saga, series, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, if you've not watched the others, go back. There is like 5 others to watch before this for some real good context. They're all straight behind this video, so easy enough to find, or just look in the Stories About Kevin playlist and they're all there. Otherwise, if you're caught up and that sounds like something you'd be interested in listening to today, then please do stick around and enjoy. And don't forget to like and subscribe, please. Thank you. Okie dokie, this one is titled Kevin in a Big Rig Part 9, Nuclear Winter. Ooh, fancy. So, hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Kevin in a Big Rig. If you haven't already, please check out all previous posts in this series before continuing, particularly parts 2 to 7, in order to get up to speed on the story so far. So many of you have been begging for the conclusion of the first Kevin, FK saga, and have been anxiously watching Reddit and YouTube waiting for the grand finale. I know it seems like I have been intentionally tormenting you with cliffhangers, but I can assure you that I am simply trying to balance narrative content and maintaining a manageable length. Finishing with cliffhangers allows me to provide a quality story without tying up hours of your time. But this time there will be no cliffhanger. That being said, I would suggest start reading with a full coffee cup and an empty bladder, because this is gonna be a long one. And so, to put an end to the suffering, let's get into Kevin in a Big Rig, Part 9, Nuclear Winter. Backstory: this installment begins immediately after the events in Part 8. It wasn't long after leaving that truck stop in Wisconsin that I began regretting my decision to push on. It seemed as if the storm had been watching us since we had left Lewiston and decided to lay a trap for us once we were back in Minnesota, and decided to lay a trap for us once we crossed back into Minnesota on that remote 2-lane highway. Because of course it did, yes, that sounds about right, doesn't it? Bloody hell. The weather is always trying to get us all. It's out for us, I'm telling you what. The Earth's just really annoyed, I think. And yeah, it's like, do you know what? Let me rain on your day, actually. Thank you. Every moment that passed brought heavier snowfall, falling temperatures, and winds that threatened to push the truck into the ditch and leave us stranded. Even as the sun went down and the sky turned to pitch black, there was no sign that the storm was inclined to show mercy. On the contrary, it seemed dead set on punishing me for the hell I had unleashed upon the company a few days before. Karma can be a bitch like that. I've learnt that during times of life-threatening conditions beyond the control of mortal humans, people have one of two reactions. Many, unable to cope with having their fate in hands other than their own, become overwhelmed with anxiety and give in to irrational panic. That's me. Those who are unwilling to simply resign themselves to whatever fate may have in store will stop at nothing until they find a way to cheat fate, long enough to make an escape. That night, I knew that giving in to fear would more than likely end in our deaths. At the very least, we would be stranded in the middle of nowhere until someone dug us out of several feet of snow. Maintaining control of both myself and the truck was non-negotiable if I wanted to see the next morning. Since fear and panic would serve no purpose, I disengaged the emotional parts of my brain and relied purely on instinct, skills, and training. As the night wore on and the conditions steadily worsened, I could feel my control of the situation waning with each mile that passed. The increasingly heavy snowfall limited visibility to a couple of dozen meters, and the wind hammered against the trailer as if it were the sail of a tall ship. The narrow roads offered very little margin for error, and the strong wind gusts required precise corrections in order to keep all 18 wheels on the asphalt. The headlights, to their credit, did their best to light the way forward, but with the combined onslaught of dense snow falling from the sky and being blown in front of the truck, they hampered visibility almost as often as they assisted. As visibility oscillated between meters to inches and back within the span of seconds, I had to rely on instinct and timing to keep the truck between the ditches. At times, the snow was so thick that even the beams from the headlights disappeared completely underneath a blanket of white powder. Oh my goodness. Like, my butt would be twitching, that's all I can say. More than twitching, actually. I think I'd be in a full-blown existential crisis at that point. To say that I wasn't tempted to abandon the trip and take my chances with keeping FK out of the seat would be a complete lie. I mean, you could, if you had any, duct tape him to his bunk. Like, that would keep him away from the driving seat. I don't know how many suitable parking places I passed that night. Many I very nearly took advantage of, only to change my mind at the last second and push deeper into the storm. When I passed a small mum-and-pop truck stop that, in spite of the frozen tempest, was still open and offering food, shelter, and safe harbour, I was convinced that I had gone completely insane. Who in their right mind would forego sanctuary when the odds were so heavily stacked against him? You don't lick me. Gross. I had my hand resting on my knee, and the cat just thought, nibble nibble. That would be me, apparently. Each time the temptation of seeking shelter crossed my mind, I was immediately reminded that we were well off the beaten path as far as safety was concerned. FK, completely oblivious as to what was waiting for us, wouldn't think twice before diving headfirst into the storm until he received an order to shut down that I knew would never come. His needlessly heavy braking, teeth-rattling gear changes, and inability to drive 5 minutes without taking his eyes off the road to check his notebook would slash our chances of making it through the night from remote to non-existent. The only way to keep FK out of the driver's seat, short of killing him, was to make sure my backside didn't leave it. For me, the entire night was an unending exercise in keeping my growing fear in check. Before that night, the most terrifying situation I could remember being in was the time I was doing my solo cross-country flight as part of the training for my pilot's license. That day, I found myself alone in a small airplane, dodging an intense line of thunderstorms while being almost completely lost. I mention it here because during that long snow-laden hell, my mind kept going back to that day of dodging thunderstorms. I made it out of that nightmare alive and arriving at my destination before the storms overtook me by sticking to my training, keep calm, avoid areas of limited visibility, use everything I had to find the runway, and get on the ground as quickly as possible. Strange as it sounds, remembering that brush with death at the hands of Mother Nature brought me some small amount of comfort. I made it out of that death trap alive, so I could surely make it through this one. Driving through a blizzard isn't a skill they teach you at CDL school. However, the ability to operate in limited visibility on slick roads and high winds are all concepts included in the training. I had faced all 3 challenges before that night in a truck. This was simply the first time I had to deal with all 3 at once. Fortunately, all 3 problems required the same solution. Slow down, maintain a stable speed, and avoid rapid change in speed and direction. It was something that my instructors at the school as well as my trainers had emphasised heavily. Fortunately for me and FK, I paid attention in class. Well, I'm glad one of you blummin' did. FK, I swear he was just sitting there twiddling his thumbs and picking his bum the whole time. I don't know exactly how long I pushed through that ice-covered nightmare. There were times when the truck felt as if it were about to give up and skid off the road, only to oblige my corrections and keep going just a bit longer. Each time I came upon a bridge or overpass, my sphincter would tighten up so quick that it felt as though my butt cheeks were biting holes in the sea. What a lovely mental image, OP. Thank you. Thanks for that. It's bedtime after I've recorded this, and what a sweet thing to sleep to. Whenever the truck dropped into a small valley, the cross-current snowdrifts resulted in a few heart-stopping moments of complete blindness until the truck climbed out through the far side. With each passing moment, a new threat presented itself, and each time I did my best to push through. Call it skill, luck, relentless stubbornness, or divine intervention. One guess would be as good as the other. Regardless, with less than 10 miles left until reaching the company's main terminal, the blizzard had finally begun to tire itself out. The snow continued to fall in heavy sheets, but the wind had abated to more manageable level, and the visibility improved dramatically. As the remote countryside gave way to the outermost edges of town, white and orange streetlights revealed what resembled a post-apocalyptic cityscape. Every store, gas station, and restaurant was dark and empty, as if the entire town had been evacuated. I have a very clear image of that in my mind right now, actually, because, okay, so I've probably mentioned this before, but I do not watch horror films, cannot watch them. However, I am extremely interested in the genre of horror. I know, backwards, isn't it? So I can read about it, or I can listen to somebody else tell me about it. And I can see stills from horror films, but I just can't actively watch a horror film. So I've kind of got really into, I think is it Roanoke Gaming, his videos, because he does and because I'm a massive fucking nerd as well, and I love sciencey stuff and all of that, and I love watching documentaries. It's like a nice amalgamation of the two. So I was just watching his on some zombie film or something, and there was a still from in the film where it's like a snow-covered city, post-apocalyptic city, and that is literally what I'm imagining right now. Anyway, we've gone off on a completely irrelevant tangent here, to be honest. Sorry. I feel we're all used to that happening now here, aren't we? When I finally pulled into that terminal parking lot, set the truck brakes and put myself off duty, I didn't feel relieved or grateful. In fact, I don't remember feeling anything. I sat in the driver's seat for a good half hour, smoking a cigarette in an attempt to bring myself back from whatever trance I'd fallen into. I watched the snow through the windshield while trying to come to grips with what had taken place over the past few hours. Winter had thrown everything it had at me, and, despite my own predictions, I made it out alive and in one piece. I didn't break out in tears, nor did I feel the need to shout in triumph. I was simply exhausted, mentally and physically. When the need to pee came upon me, I got out of the truck. Being late at night, all of the offices and shops were closed, but the company maintained a 24-hour restroom and shower facility at the shop for drivers camped out at the terminal. However, at the moment I needed to make use of the facility, it was closed for cleaning. That is, there was a wet floor sign in the middle of the restroom, a chain across the door, and not a single living soul inside. The floor was covered with melted snow and dirt, much like that on the bottom of my boots. No harm in soiling what's already dirty, I think, so I go inside and relieve myself. On the way out, as luck would have it, the shop assistant who had been assigned to clean that particular restroom came back from whatever had interrupted his job. When he saw me, he apparently took my trespass on his workplace as a personal affront. "Hey," he said with the tone that would make any Karen jealous, "are you stupid? Can't you read the fucking sign?" I, not missing a beat, reply, "Would you rather I stand at the door and piss the floor, asshole?" I was not in any mood to deal with a bad attitude at that point. The assistant gets into a huff. "You damn drivers, I get so tired of your shit." He never finished his sentence as I, a good deal larger than him, got right in his face, looked him dead in the eye, and raised a finger in warning. "Don't fuck with me, head. Not tonight, I warn him. After the hell I just went through, I had no intention of allowing some self-important peon to tell me I couldn't relieve an empty bladder because my dirty boots would make his dirty floor even dirtier. Back outside, I light another cigarette and stand beneath the awning, watching the snow fall through the lamplights. Then, as is habit, I take out my phone. I see an unread email. It must have come during the drive and I didn't realise. It was from the fleet manager and I was suddenly reminded as to why I had made the nightmare journey. That email, I knew, would set the stage for the fight that I had been waiting for. Where, when, who, and what would be involved would be outlined in that message. For the past few days, I had considered every possible contingency of the meeting and felt more than ready. In my point of view, I held all the cards and controlled the terms. Any threats or attempts at coercion, and they would quickly find themselves in a world of hurt. I was ready for anything, and opened the email. OP, when you get to the terminal, move on to truck 3456 and meet with driver Bob, ID 9123, not real name. We'll send instructions in the morning, FM. Okay, I wasn't ready for that. Ooh, it sounds like OP's getting assigned a new partner, yay! I wanted a new partner, true enough, but I had no idea they would move that quickly. I didn't know who Bob was or why I was being assigned to his truck. Maybe he did. One way to find out. I go back to the truck. FK had been sleeping during the entire trip from Wisconsin to the terminal. Just as well, since any snarky comment from him during that blizzard might have been made with his last breath. Now he was wide awake and poring over the computer. "Where are we?" he asked. I go straight to the bunk and begin packing my gear. Main terminal. FM called me earlier and told me to get here right away. What's the deal? At this point, I could have let him in on what he might expect. However, I believe finding oneself in a fair fight is a sign of poor tactics. I don't know, but I've been assigned to another truck. FK said nothing. He had been completely taken by surprise and had no idea what he was likely in for. Then again, neither did I. I expected to go a few rounds with safety the next morning, and now I'm packing my bags for a new truck. Simply got out of the truck, and I never saw him again. I packed my belongings, left my key in the glove box, and left the truck for the last time. A few moments later, I'm knocking on the door of a new truck. "Are you Bob?" I asked the driver when he answers. "Yeah," he said, rubbing his eyes, since I had just woken him up. "Are you OP?" "That's me," I reply, and climb aboard. "Sorry to wake you up, we just got here." At first, this doesn't register with him. Then he realises what I just told him. "Wait, you drove through that shit?" I take a deep breath. "Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it if you're curious." "You must be nuts," he said. "You have no idea. I guess we're partners now," I say. Bob screws his face at me. "No," he said, confused. "My partner is waiting for me in Pennsylvania. I was supposed to leave out yesterday afternoon, but FM called and told me to wait for you. I figured you'd know what the deal was." I give him the basic rundown of what happened with my now former co-driver, how I reported him to safety, and now relayed back to the main terminal. "Damn, man," he replied. "Sounds like a rough gig. Understatement of the year, I think." The next morning, the weather had broken. The sky was dull and threatened to bring more snow, but the wind had dulled to a gentle breeze. As soon as she was in the office, FM gave me a call. "Hey, OP," she said, sounding a bit nervous. "Where are you guys at?" "Sitting in the yard." "Wait," she replied, sounding a bit confused. "You made it in last night?" "Sure did." "What in the God's name possessed you to drive through that storm?" I take a deep breath. It would be best if I didn't elaborate on that point. She wanted to press for more information, but decided not to. "Uh-huh. Did you meet with Bob and move to his truck?" "Sure did." "What's the deal?" "You and Bob are going to take a load to the terminal in Pennsylvania. His co-driver will meet him there. I'm going to have you pick up another truck and we'll go from there." "Okay," I respond cautiously. "Am I going to meet my new co-driver up there too?" No, we haven't found you one yet. Just check in with me when you get there and we'll see what happens. No problem. We hang up and I fill Bob in on our new marching orders. The company's terminal in Pennsylvania was about a day and a half with 2 drivers. Fortunately, Bob had already picked up the load before the storm hit, so all we had to do was get rolling. Since the truck was permanently assigned to Bob and he had just finished his stint with his trainer, I offer him the first drive shift so he can get used to the truck. As we head out, I go to see the full impact from the previous night's storm. About 24 inches of snow had fallen in just under 12 hours. Every 5 minutes we saw cars spun out and abandoned in ditches and centre medians. At nearly every overpass we came upon, there was at least one vehicle that had lost control and collided with the barrier. There were even more semis jackknifed and abandoned where they had hit deadly patches of black ice. Severe winter weather was common in this part of the country, and even the local residents didn't fare well. When I saw the carnage from the very storm I traversed, I realised how much danger I had been in, and how lucky we had been that FK had not been the one driving. Holy shit, Bob said after we passed a semi that had left the road and was now laying on the side. You drove through this? I take a deep breath. Yep. For being an inexperienced driver, Bob knew his stuff. For the first time since I finished my time with my trainer, I was riding with someone who actually knew what the hell they were doing. I had Bob for only a few hours, but I felt more comfortable with him at the wheel than I ever did with FK, and I told him as much. We top off the tanks at the fuel stop, I grab a bite of breakfast, and head back to the bunk to rest up for my night shift. The rest of the trip to Pennsylvania, I'm happy to say, was uneventful. I bet that was just such a much needed, breath of fresh air. I bet that's the first time OP's probably been able to get in their bunk and truly relax for, weeks. Oh my god. When Bob and I arrived at the Pennsylvania terminal, we say our goodbyes and I go sign out my new truck. I move aboard, store my belongings, and log into the computer before sending a message to FM that I'm ready to go. An hour later, she sends me a load, pick up the next morning from a nearby shipper with delivery in Missouri. She says to expect a diversion back to the main terminal along the way, but she will let me know for sure before the time comes. I confirm the instructions and set the computer aside. For a long time, I sat in the driver's seat and looked around the truck. I was all alone. FK was 1,000 miles away, and for the time being at least, I had won a battle with management before it had even started. And then, for a reason I can't fully explain, I started to laugh. Whether it was out of relief or simply submitting to the absurdity of the situation, it felt as though a huge burden had been lifted off my shoulders and things were beginning to look up. I ended up taking the load all the way to Missouri alone. In fact, I worked solo for the next 2 weeks, and all I can say is that it was heaven. I felt in complete control, never had to worry about waking up on the shoulder of a highway, not getting an hour of sleep before being drug out of bed to help FK out of another jam, and no more having my head bounce off of a cabinet because of a hard brake check. It was what I had hoped trucking would be, and I was enjoying every minute of it. After a few days into my solo period, I get a surprise phone call from the last person I ever expected to hear from. FK was reaching out. What? What? Colour me surprised. Hey man, FK said, sounding less confrontational and, unless I was mistaken, anxiety. What are you up to? On my way to Texas, running solo. Cool. I need a favour. Okay. Can you call safety and tell them that I said I had been in a coma for 21 hours? Oh, FK, come on now. What? I say, shocked. You told me 21 days. Countless times. Look, man, this is important. He then goes into a long sob story. According to him, he and his wife went through a nasty divorce. His wife had been granted full custody of their 2 kids. He also said that he had been to court and the judge ordered him to come back in a year with gainful employment or he would be sent to jail. Why jail? Oh, I assumed that it pertained to spousal or child support, though I don't know for certain. Oh, okay, I didn't know you could get jailed in the US for not paying spousal or child support. Over here, you just get a slap on the wrist, it seems. He signed on with the company because they were the only place that would hire him. Well, I reply, doesn't sound like something I can help with, but if safety calls, I'll see what I can do. Poor bastard had no idea who put him in that position. I hung up and never heard from him again. I went about having the time of my life. Not only was I having the time of my life, the fact I didn't have to waste so much time correcting FK's mistakes meant that I was able to make pickups and deliveries on time, stay on course, and complete my loads without a single issue. In fact, I didn't need dispatch for anything more than sending load information. I didn't even talk to FM for a week and a half before she called me out of the blue. "Hey OP," she said, sounding a little curious. "How's everything going?" "Hey FM, everything's going fine. What's up?" "Oh, nothing," she replied, relieved and now sounding rather chipper. "I haven't heard from you in a while." "Well, I say, trying to make it clear I was joking. No offence, but I haven't needed to call you." "That's good to hear. When you and FK were together, he was calling me about once a day, needing directions, getting lost. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm not FK." "No, you're not. Anyway, I'm gonna work on getting you home for a few days. I found you a co-driver and I'm gonna have you pick him up when you come back to work. He doesn't live too far from you." I'll admit, I was disappointed by this news. I was thoroughly enjoying being on my own, but I also knew that solo assignments didn't last long. The company relied on expedited freight, loads with tight deadlines that required 2 drivers to make on-time delivery. Running solo was only allowed as a short-term measure to allow trucks to keep working until a second driver could be found. A few days after the phone call from FM, I go home and spend 4 days sleeping in my own bed, sitting on my couch and watching my TV. Sounds pretty boring, I know, but after 3 months of hell with FK, there was nowhere else I wanted to be. Oh, I imagine that was so nice. Oh, there's nothing like being in your own house, in your own bed. Honestly, if I spend one night outside of my house, I am dying to get back home. I am such a flipping hermit, honestly. And I rarely ever spend a night outside of my own house. Very rare. I think the last time I did was New Year's Eve. And then I got home and I was like, oh, my own house, my own bed. I have missed you. And obviously the cats. The cats were fine though. They had a cat sitter. They didn't care. Well, they did. One of them did. One of them is like my shadow. The others were just like, oh yay, food lady's back. The 4 days passed all too quickly and I was assigned to head back out on the road. I met up with my second co-driver, we'll call him NG for new guy. Like Bob, NG had just completed his month with a trainer and was ready to be a co-driver. While less experienced, he was still a competent enough driver. There was not much more I can say about NG. He and I were only partners for a couple of months before he decided to leave for a better job. He wasn't under the same contract as me, and I didn't blame him for leaving, so we parted on good terms. By now, you're probably wondering, what happened to FK? Yes, I'm very much wondering that. I'm dying to know. When did you and Safety have that battle royale? How much damage did the nuclear email actually do? Truth is, I was asking myself those very same questions for the 2.5 months between the last time I saw FK and the time NG went on to greener pastures. I decided not to pry, thinking my little nuclear attack probably painted a target on my back, and discretion was the better part of valour. After all, I got what I wanted. FK was long gone as far as I was concerned, and no matter what he did, he was someone else's problem. Was I curious? Sure, just not enough to stretch my neck and find out. When NG left, I found myself back in the same position I had been in before. No suitable co-driver was available. By this time, the company had begun to crack down on solo drivers, and I was routed back to the main terminal until something could be figured out. The day I arrived back at the main terminal, I meet with FM to go over my options. Before that, however, she pulls me into another office with the safety director. When I see the name plaque on the door, a cold chill ran up my spine. It wasn't the battle I had been waiting for. In fact, the reason they wanted to meet me had nothing to do with the nuclear email. They offered me a promotion to lead driver. At first, I wasn't sure that I wanted to deal with more idiot drivers after barely surviving FK, but the only other option was to bounce from truck to truck until a permanent co-driver could be found, a prospect I found equally uncomfortable. I asked for a little time to think about it, and they obliged. I gave my old trainer a call to get his advice. My trainer and I stayed in touch to this day and became good friends. He suggested I go for it since I would be the boss and could, within reason, boot a bad student off the truck if he proved too dangerous. I hadn't considered that and ultimately decided to take the job. I mean, to be fair, they've probably seen how good of a job the OP did dealing with FK and his many, many idiocies and stupid things that he did. And they're probably thinking, yeah, this guy's definitely material to be a lead driver. Yep. Later that afternoon, I was back in FM's office getting paperwork ready for my new job. While we were waiting for safety to approve the promotion, I decided to ask, "What's FK been up to?" FM buries her face in her hands. Those 5 words had reopened a nasty wound. Trying to control her frustration, she told me what happened after I left with Bob to Pennsylvania. While I was sent on what was a vacation by comparison, FK had been tasked with completing the load that we had picked up in Lewiston. However, in typical FK fashion, he got lost almost as soon as he left terminal. He had gotten so far off course that the GPS locator on the truck couldn't even be found by dispatch. It took him an entire day to get back on track, only to do the exact same thing twice before finally making delivery 2 days late. Wow. The next day they sent him another load assignment but had to cancel it because he couldn't find the pickup location, despite the fact that it was less than a mile away. Oh my god. How did he actually pass? I am so concerned that someone let him pass and get his license. It was at that point that safety decided to pull him back in until they could get to the bottom of the situation. When he got lost again on the way back, they had him leave the truck in a truck stop and catch a ride with another truck. Why did they send him back out after the nuclear email? While I never got a solid confirmation, the rumour is that the safety department used it as an experiment just to see if my claims had any merit. Fair, but that's really worrying that they would do that when he is under the control of a giant, heavy piece of equipment in just around the public. That's, yikes. Needless to say, they found out real quick I wasn't bullshitting them. If they didn't believe that FK was a menace before, they couldn't deny it now. The question was what to do with him. They pulled FK in for a meeting to get to the bottom of the issue. When asked about why he kept getting lost, he maintained that he was following the company route. Then they asked about why he couldn't find a shipper less than a mile away. He said he was waiting for the company to send directions. As the meeting wore on, FK became more and more worrisome. In his opinion, it was the job of the dispatch office to tell him every move to make. Something that is utterly impossible since one dispatcher was often charged with dozens of other trucks and couldn't be expected to babysit each of them. Drivers have to be able to work out issues for themselves and think on their feet when problems arise. FK wasn't able to be independent, and whenever the situation required it of him, he ended up in trouble. Everything that took place led to one irrefutable conclusion. FK was either medically or mentally unfit to operate a commercial vehicle. They had dug into the claim about the 21-day coma, but found no mention of it in his paperwork. Despite the fact that 2 credible witnesses provided corroborating accounts, it wasn't in his file. When they questioned him, he denied it at first, but a brief investigation discovered the truth. It was a 21-day coma. How did FK manage to slip through the cracks, get a CDL, and go for 4 months before being caught? In simple terms, he lied. In order to get a CDL, one must have a DOT medical certificate. Part of the process of getting that certificate is completing a rather lengthy questionnaire about medical history, drug or alcohol dependency, illnesses, medical conditions, etc. One of these questions asks the applicant to describe any brain or neurological injury or condition. Another more generic and subjective question asked if the applicant had any other condition that would interfere with the safe operation of a commercial motor vehicle. FK, like all other new hires, received a DOT physical soon after he arrived at the training facility, where he filled out the questionnaire form, a form that is controlled by the federal government, and, per regulation, the company retained on file. As it happened, FK had not told the medical examiner about the coma. When they asked him about it, he tried to backpedal and say that it was 21 hours. But when they checked his medical records, I don't know how they did this without violating confidentiality laws, they learned that it was, in fact, 21 days. I wonder if maybe they had said to him, look, you need to show us your medical records and agree to show them to us, or we are just going to fire you. Because we can't risk it. I imagine that's probably what went down. I don't know if that's legal, but yeah. I assume it was kind of a case of you need to show us your records or we're gonna just get rid of you anyway. So you need to prove it if you haven't had that 21-day coma. And with that, FK's fate was sealed. He had lied on a government document and obtained a medical certificate and CDL through fraudulent means. After realizing this, the company had no choice but to report the incident to the Department of Transportation. The DOT, in turn, revoked FK's medical certificate, rendered his CDL invalid. This was also reported to the DMV of the state that issued his license, and per state law, the state also revoked his CDL. The company had no choice but to fire him. FK had sabotaged his own driving career on day one. FM, after telling all this, admitted that she had her doubts about him early on due to an incident that had happened just before he and I paired up. He was running solo and was supposed to deliver a load in Indianapolis. For whatever reason, FK couldn't find the receiver and, according to GPS pings, actually drove around in circles for 2 full days before someone noticed and asked what was going on. When they finally had the issue straightened out, they noticed that, during the entire 2-day period, FK was less than 2 miles from the delivery point, driving around in circles. Oh my goodness. For 2 days? Wow. FM had hoped that another partner would straighten him out, but it was clear that that wasn't happening. All she could do was apologise to me. I wonder if this means that FK is now stiffed for that $6,000 that it cost to get the license. Like, did FK pay for their license up front themselves? Or did the company pay for it? But the story doesn't end with FK destroying his own career. I made a few friends in the company's head office who were there when the nuclear email hit, and over a period of several months, I was able to piece together the full story and fallout of the nuclear email. Bear in mind that it's mostly secondhand information, but they claimed it to be true. After being informed of FK's fraud, the DOT wanted to know how the hell someone like him could slip through so easily. When asked how the issue was discovered, the company showed my email to the DOT, who, in turn, went ballistic. The company, hoping to avoid being prosecuted for negligence, cooperated by conducting an internal audit of the company's policies and procedures. They found several serious shortcomings in many departments, right down to the recruiter who processed and approved FK's application. Apparently, the application was approved before a basic MVR, motor vehicle report, was completed. The motor vehicle report showed no fewer than 4 accidents on FK's record where he was at fault within the past 3 years. One was enough to disqualify him. However, it was later discovered that recruiters were often encouraged or coerced to overlook such things and simply get people to sign up and get them to the training facility. Apparently, this was to take advantage of a government hiring incentive, despite the fact that the drivers weren't officially hired until after completing CDL school. Additionally, the Hours of Service Compliance Department, whose job it was to monitor drivers' logs and handle violations, had failed to act whenever FK, among many other drivers, violated the HOS regulations. The reasoning for this, so they claimed, is that they were overwhelmed with correcting errors in driver logs made by improperly trained drivers. As a result, they were only allowed to issue notices of non-compliance when the computer flagged consistent violations. Even the safety department found itself under fire when it was revealed that their own people were telling new drivers not to make use of important safety features on the truck, namely engine brakes. This became such a concern that, according to rumour, safety director himself sat in on a new hire orientation and, upon hearing the presenter actively discourage the use of engine brakes, removed the presenter from the class on the spot and demanded the orientation course be overhauled as soon as possible. In the end, it came down to the safety personnel being reminded they were not drivers and had no business giving their opinion in place of facts. The last department to take a major hit was training. After reviewing the company's accident history, it became very clear that many new drivers were not properly trained in several key areas. In order to shorten their time at the training facility, the company preferred to teach students the bare minimum to pass the CDL test. What? That is crazy. Why? That is so dangerous. The company preferred to teach students the bare minimum to pass the CDL test and rely on lead drivers to fill in the gaps. The problem with this system was that there was very little in the way of standardised rubric by which a student driver's skills could be assessed. Essentially, lead drivers were left to their own devices while training students. Whether or not the student passed or failed was, for the most part, dependent on the lead driver's subjective assessment. There were other issues that were uncovered during the audit that are quite technical, but suffice to say, the company had a lot of problems that needed to be fixed and quick. Despite this, the DOT agreed to withhold prosecution under the condition that the problems were to be fixed within a set period of time. I heard rumours that a few people were fired due to negligence, but I have no way of confirming that. I can only assume that things improved because the company is still in operation to this day. As for me, I finished out my 8-month contract as lead driver. When the contract was fulfilled, I leased a truck under the company's independent contractor program in order to make more money. That was the idea, at least. I did that for several months before growing tired of their mismanagement and left to work for another company. I drove long haul for another year before deciding to move into sectors that allowed me to have more of a life outside of a truck cab. Today, I'm fortunate to work for a fantastic outfit that really appreciates its employees and allows me to be home every night and on weekends. I bet that's so nice after doing all that. Like, truck driving sounds very stressful. Very stressful. As for the ultimate fate of FK, I can't say with any real certainty. Despite everything, I don't hate him. I hope he was able to get the help he needed and turn his life around. If so, then at least some good would have come of everything that happened. And with that, the saga of FK comes to an end. For those of you that have followed this story since the beginning, I honestly hope that you don't find this ending a disappointment and worth the time and torturous cliffhangers I have, albeit reluctantly, subjected you to. On a serious note, while I used humour to lighten the tone of the previous episodes, I would be remiss if I did not remind you that these stories are all true, and the 3-month period in which the bulk of this story takes place was anything but humorous. If reading about the trip through the blizzard is terrifying, imagine feeling that way each night before you went to bed, and you would have some idea of what I really endured 7 years ago. But the nightmare is long over, and sharing these stories with you wonderful people has helped me put to rest a dark chapter of my life that I wasn't aware still haunted me. Until next time, dear readers, remember, if someone offers you a Kevin, just say no. And that's the end of the Kevin in a Big Rig saga. Oh my goodness, I applaud the OP for managing to last 3 months with that absolute buffoon, to be honest. That's crazy, absolutely crazy. Like, I just can't imagine how it would feel to go to bed every night or wherever your shift is, like your shift's over, in your bunker, not knowing what carnage you were going to wake up to, but knowing there would be carnage for 3 months, and you can't escape, and you've got to be in that flipping cab with that same dude who's causing you all these problems, and you are just stuck together for 3 months. That sounds horrific. I'm glad the OP's doing good. I hope they're still doing good now. I hope FK sorted his shit out somehow. Oh my goodness. Crazy. Anyway, let's have a look at the comments, shall we? The Wandering Ghost says, well, those 8 parts were a ride. And what a ride. As to FK, there are rumours that say that he is still making that circle that he was making before he was assigned to you. Anyway, I think that's all we've got time for today. It's taken me nearly an hour to record this last bit. Pray for me whilst I edit. Oh my god. If you made it all the way to the end with me, then I appreciate you very, very much. If you give me a little like, subscribe, notifications on, that is your initiation into the Coven of Void. Welcome. Don't forget to leave the offering of a comment for Big Al. Tell me about your nightmare co-worker that you've had to deal with, past, present, or whatever. I would love to hear about it. Whatever it is you're doing for the day, I hope you have a really good rest of the day. Goodbye.